Are you sure the balance in your bank account is real wealth? Or is it just a promise you've seen so often that you now call it safety? Berlin, 1922. The middle class held cash. Hugo Stinnes held factories, coal mines, ships, and land. 18 months later, paper money was dead. Real assets were not. And the disturbing part is this: that pattern never disappeared. In this video, I'll show you why. Before every serious monetary break, large pools of capital leave paper and move into substance, power, and things that cannot be printed out of nothing. Because the real question is not what the rich are buying. The real question is what you are still calling safe, simply because it feels familiar. Berlin, 1922. Germany was still holding on to a comforting belief. Cash was safety. Work hard. Save steadily. Wait for stability to return, and life would eventually normalize. But Hugo Stinnes saw what the crowd refused to see. The German mark was no longer wealth. It was paper losing credibility by the day. So while ordinary people kept stacking cash, Stinnes did the opposite. He borrowed in paper money, then used that weakening currency to buy factories, coal mines, ships, land, newspapers, and productive assets. He was not chasing prices. He was exchanging promises for substance. That was the real move. When hyperinflation exploded, the saving class was destroyed. Wages melted almost in real time. But the people holding real assets did not collapse with the currency. They came out of the chaos in a stronger position than before. History has seen this before, and that is the first lesson. When money begins to fail, the illusion of safety usually fails with it. This is where most people blur two very different ideas. Money and wealth are not the same thing. Money is only a tool of exchange, a temporary claim, a ticket that lets you demand goods, services, a boor, any boor, and time from other people. But real wealth is something else entirely. Real wealth still exists, even when the ticket starts losing value. Land is still land. Gold is still gold. Energy still powers machines. Wheat still feeds people. A copper mine still matters. Even if the currency used to price it changes names 3 times. The problem is that most societies start living as if money itself were wealth. They look at an account balance and call it security. They see wages rise and assume they are better off. But if wages rise while housing rises faster, food rises faster, and healthcare and education rise faster, then you are not getting richer. You are just falling behind more slowly. What feels solid is often just what feels familiar. And in monetary history, familiarity has often been the trap. Now bring that lesson straight into the present. Money today no longer looks like a thin paper note from Weimar Germany. It is cleaner, smoother, and more elegant. It lives inside your phone, your bank account, your digital wallet. A row of glowing numbers on a screen. The interface has changed. The feeling has improved, but the nature of it has not changed at all. It is still a promise, still a claim on a system, still a belief that tomorrow those numbers will buy what you need them to buy. And that is the hidden danger of modern life. When something fragile is wrapped in a perfectly convenient interface, people forget what it really is. One tap and the payment goes through. So we assume the value behind it is just as stable. We watch our balance update in real time. So we assume our wealth is sitting there untouched. But history has seen this pattern before. The labels change. The technology changes. The surface changes. The structure does not. Before every major monetary break, capital begins leaving promises and moving toward things that do not depend on promises at all. The first kind of asset, large capital, usually moves into before the cracks become obvious. It's productive land. Not land that exists only for speculation, not property inflated by resale fantasy, but land that produces something people must have. Land that grows food. Land with water. Land tied to real supply chains. Land that matters whether markets are euphoric or terrified. That distinction is everything. You can print more money. You can expand credit. You can rescue a banking system. But you cannot print fertile soil. You cannot print another harvest. You cannot command nature to produce more just because finance is under pressure. That is why productive land becomes an anchor. It is not glamorous. It does not trigger the excitement of fast money. But in every monetary cycle, the most durable assets are rarely the fastest moving ones. They are the ones closest to basic human need. When paper systems begin to wobble, assets connected to food, water, and real output suddenly look very different. Slow assets become strategic assets. Why does that matter for an ordinary viewer? Because the lesson here is not that everyone should rush out and buy farmland tomorrow. The real lesson is that most people need to relearn how to judge an asset. Most people judge by price. People who understand cycles judge by function. A strong asset is not just something you can sell later for more money. It is something that still matters when credit tightens. Something that still stands when confidence weakens. Something that holds purchasing power while the currency is being quietly worn down. That is why productive land means more than ordinary real estate. It is not just property. It is part of the nervous system of the real economy. And that is where this video comes back to your own life. Ask yourself how much food, rent, energy, or land your income buys today compared with 3 years ago. Or 5. If your working hours go up while your purchasing power goes down, then you are not moving forward. You are only being dragged backward more slowly. The second asset history keeps pointing back to is physical gold. And this is usually the moment when the crowd starts laughing, right before the panic begins. People say gold does not generate cash flow. That is true, because gold was never designed to behave like a company. It was designed to do something else. Hold purchasing power when confidence in paper money begins to erode. Gold does not need a board of directors. It does not need a bank in the middle. It does not need anyone's promise to pay you later. It exists outside the promise, outside the balance sheet, outside the game of printing more. That is why, in every age of instability, gold is dismissed as outdated and then suddenly rediscovered as an anchor. Rome understood that. Old European empires understood that. Families trying to preserve wealth across generations understood that too. Gold is not a rocket. It is an anchor. It does not promise to make you rich fast. It helps keep you from being carried away when the currency starts losing its grip on reality. What matters is that the people who understand the monetary game best rarely behave the way they sound on television. In calm times, everyone praises fiat currency, bonds, liquidity, and order. But when risks begin building beneath the surface, when debt gets too large, when geopolitics heats up, when trust between nations starts to fray, serious capital goes back to one old question: what does not depend on someone else's promise? That is why gold never really disappeared from monetary history. It gets pushed to the margin in quiet periods, then moves back toward the center the moment the foundation starts looking unstable. And this is the contrarian turn most people miss. The thing dismissed as old-fashioned often turns out to be the thing that survives the longest. The thing celebrated as modern is often just a fresh coat of paint over the same old fragility. Paper changed form. Human behavior did not. When promises start looking less reliable, people go looking for something that does not need confidence in order to exist. But this is where we should be precise. Gold is not a cure for stupidity. It does not save someone with no discipline. It does not replace skill, income, or financial structure. Gold is not magic. Its role is more modest than that, which is exactly why it matters. It helps you measure the world more honestly. It cuts through the illusion of nominal price. Try a simple exercise. Do not just look at your income in dollars. Look at it in gold. 5 years ago, how many ounces or grams could 1 month of your work buy? How much can it buy now? Then do the same with your savings. Your rent, your grocery bill, your healthcare costs. Once you change the measuring stick, a colder truth starts coming into focus. Many people are not getting poorer because they make less money. They are getting poorer because the unit measuring their life has been quietly weakened. Money is not what you count. Money is what it can still command. And once that command fades, the illusion of progress starts falling apart. The third type of asset has to be understood carefully, or it gets misunderstood very quickly. These are compact stores of value, high-value assets that are portable discreet, and not fully trapped inside the banking grid. 4. The ultra-rich. That can mean art, rare collectibles, exceptional watches, gemstones, or other objects capable of holding significant value in a very small space. Do not get distracted by the luxury wrapper. The deeper principle matters more than the object itself. The principle is portability. When a system starts building fences, the assets that are easiest to freeze become the most vulnerable. The more your wealth depends on a middleman, the more exposed it becomes. But assets that can move, that can cross borders, that can survive outside a single gatekeeper, give their owner more breathing room. This is not advice for ordinary people to go buy expensive art. It is a reminder of something deeper. Do not let your entire financial life sit inside one form, one system, one promise, and then call that security. Concentration often feels safe right up until the door locks, and that is where an uncomfortable truth begins to surface. Most people do not really own assets in the way they think they do. What they often own are claims. As long as the system keeps functioning smoothly, a bank account works beautifully until access is restricted. Cash feels safe until it starts losing purchasing power too quickly. Bonds sound respectable until the yield no longer keeps up with monetary erosion. This is where one word becomes critical: optionality. Financial freedom is not just having more money. Financial freedom is having choices, having mobility, having room to breathe when one door closes. The wealthy understand that very well. They do not wait until the crisis becomes obvious. They position themselves while everything still looks normal. And that is exactly why the crowd always arrives late. Most people wait until danger becomes visible. But by then, the price of safety has already been repriced. The real edge is not reacting faster once the alarm sounds. The real edge is recognizing the pattern before the alarm ever goes off. The fourth asset is more abstract, but it may be one of the greatest advantages large capital has: jurisdiction. In simple terms, it is not just what you own that matters. It is where that ownership sits, and under which rules it is protected. Most people think about assets horizontally. How much cash? How much property? How many stocks? But wealthy capital thinks vertically as well. If the system comes under stress, if capital controls appear, if banks restrict withdrawals, if policy changes overnight, can you still reach what you own? That is where the board splits into two different games. One game is about holding value. The other is about holding access to value. And those are not always the same thing. You can have money, but not be able to use it. You can have assets, but not be able to touch them. You can sit on a large balance, yet remain trapped inside a very small legal box. Serious capital understands that early it diversifies not only what it owns, but also where that ownership is protected. Modern history shows this is not theory. Argentina, 2001. When trust in the banking system broke, withdrawal limits were imposed. For depositors, the shock was not just financial, it was deeply psychological. Their money still existed on paper, but access to it had been squeezed shut. That was the moment many people realized something too late. They did not own their wealth in the absolute way they had imagined. They only had access to it as long as the system allowed that access to continue. And this is the key contrarian turn. What most people call safe is usually safe only while conditions remain normal. Once conditions stop being normal, the value of optionality becomes obvious. A second door, a second jurisdiction, a second channel of access, breathing room outside a single gate. For the ordinary viewer, the lesson is not to build some complex international structure overnight. The lesson is much simpler. Do not let your entire financial life sit behind one door, under one rule set, and then mistake that concentration for stability. For ordinary people, the lesson is not about becoming global elites overnight. It is about not confusing loyalty with immobility. Your money is only truly safe when it can move, when it is not locked entirely behind one gate, when one policy decision cannot freeze years of your labor with a single announcement. Freedom in finance is not a slogan. It is optionality. Without optionality, ownership becomes far more fragile than it looks. And that is the uncomfortable truth. Many people think they own assets because their name is attached to an account, a property, or a balance. But when access depends completely on the smooth operation of one system, ownership becomes conditional. It becomes permission-based. That is why serious capital values flexibility so highly. Not because it is glamorous, but because it creates room to survive policy shocks, banking stress, and system fractures. If all of your value sits behind one wall, then that wall matters more than your net worth. And once that wall moves against you, the illusion of security disappears very quickly. The fifth asset sits at an even higher level of the game. Not just holding wealth, but holding the choke points society must pass through: electricity, water, freight routes, ports, warehouses, data infrastructure, payment rails, the places people still have to pay for whether the economy is booming or contracting. This is the difference between an asset priced mostly by sentiment and an asset connected to the bloodstream of daily life. When you own a speculative apartment, you are hoping someone else will pay more later. When you own a choke point, you are standing where cash flow has to pass. That is why long-duration capital is so drawn to infrastructure. It is not flashy. It does not feed the fantasy of getting rich fast, but it endures because it is tied to needs that do not disappear just because markets are nervous. The pattern has not changed. In older ages, it was bridges, ports, grain routes, and trade corridors. Today, it is power, data, logistics, clean water, and distribution networks. New names, same structure. Whoever controls the bottleneck controls the pricing power, and that brings the full picture into focus. Before a monetary system shows obvious cracks, serious capital usually does not sit still in cash. It moves in 5 clear directions: into land, tied to necessities; into gold, as an anchor outside the promise; into portable stores of value; into jurisdictional flexibility; and into choke points of the real economy. Look closely, and they all share one thing. None of them need to be printed into existence. None of them depend entirely on the fragile confidence holding up a paper system. They are tied to scarcity, function, power, access, and physical reality. The crowd usually does the opposite. It clings harder to what is easiest to count, easiest to see, and most familiar: cash balances, nominal claims, promises dressed up as safety. Then it calls that prudence. But in monetary history, the most familiar thing is often the thing that evaporates fastest once confidence begins to crack. So here's the question this video leaves behind. Are you holding assets, or are you just holding promises that feel safe because you have seen them for too long?